Hello, everybody. We are back for the second part of the effective communication lecture in week 6. So let's hop to it, right? So what we have seen is that when we last left, we were talking about active listening skills. And if you're growing up and your parents have ever said to you, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason, they're not wrong, right? One of the things that we have to really consider is that the ability to recall information first begins with listening to others. Most people have their problem solved just if you listen to them rather than offering advice. So keep that in mind in your personal and your professional relationships. But there's a couple of different things that we need to keep in mind here for active listening skills. What are some of those things? Well, first we have to pay attention, correct? Then we have to withhold judgment. We just have to listen. We have to take the information in. And then finally, we need to reflect. Sometimes reflection takes a little bit of time. It's okay, as I've said previously, if you're willing to step back and take that time, 5 minutes, an hour, a day, a week, whatever you have the time to do, but take that time to reflect because often you have a better perspective on what information is being told to you. And you're able to kind of see another person's side of it, particularly if there's a possible conflict. And then you are able to come forth and kind of pair that with your own feelings about that subject. Clarify. Oftentimes we think we rush into things and we don't think to clarify with another person. So let me understand this. That's a good thing to do and to use that frequently. Summarize. So this is what I heard you say. Right? That's another way of saying so that you're giving what you think is how you've clarified it to another individual and allowing them to make adjustments if necessary. And then, of course, sharing information as well. These are some of the key skills for active listening. What is active listening? Why do we need active listening? Well, it's the full attention to someone. A lot of times we live in a technological world and we feel like we're distracted. I don't know how many times I have had conversations with other people. They're looking at their computer, they're looking at their phone, they're looking at something else, and there's just a noisy world and everything is very distracting. What that does is it breaks down trust. You're not able to establish a rapport and a relationship and that emotional connection that often comes with trust. And you don't really feel like someone has heard you. And that can be metaphorically and literal, right? Are you hearing me? Or are you hearing me? So these are the types of things that we have to think about and why active listening is so important. Active listening really should be coupled with eye contact. It should be coupled with a kind of an inward approach to listening. I'm interested. I want to hear you. This kind of looking around or arms crossed or looking down or whatever shows more of a distracted listening than it does an active listening. What are the 5 rules for active listening? Very similar to what we heard before, but listening for that message content, right? We want to make sure that we've heard it. We want to make sure that we are in a position where we can also listen for feelings. That's where you come into this tonality, the emotion, the body language, the eye contact. We can read so much in and understand what they're feeling and what their emotions are, responding to that. Right? If someone is angry, if they're sad, if they're happy, how do we mirror those emotions or how do we reflect those emotions in a positive way versus somebody who's mad and we're getting mad with them and maybe that's the correct response, but really we have the ability to control and help assist and to some extent even manipulate the emotions of other people just because of the way we react to what they're telling us. Take in all of the cues. And then, of course, like we previously said, paraphrase and restate. Do I have this right? Let me clarify. This is what I heard. All of those sort of statements of paraphrasing and restating that information. Okay, what are some of the different types of information? You guys know this already. This is just a review. We obviously have verbal communication. We are talking with one another. We have written communication, emails, text, things like that. Nonverbal communication, that is, where I'm crossing my arms, I'm raising my eyebrows, I'm kind of tilting my head. All of those sort of things would be nonverbal communication. But be careful because culturally, some of those nonverbal cues can be different depending on what culture you are or what country you're in. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about this. Let's talk about persuasive communication. Persuasive communication is interesting, right? Persuasive is a very positive spin on this. This is how we can change other people's beliefs and their attitudes. Spoken communication is much more persuasive. It's part of the reason why I require the groups to meet in Zoom for an hour each week, because that is, so much of what you get from a teen you cannot glean from a written communication or a you can't glean it from anything that is not verbal or spoken in some capacity. Written communication can be persuasive, but it often requires a lot of detail, and it's very much specific. In marketing, we would see persuasive written communication. So persuasive communication used in a negative way can be manipulation. All right, storytelling. Storytelling is the best way that we can. 70% of Americans are visual learners. And what does that mean for storytelling? Well, it means that if I'm telling you some sort of, we're having a conversation, if I'm lecturing in person, you're going to get a lot more stories and a lot more anecdotes out of that because you're going to remember that. It's much easier for you to remember theory that's kind of been rolled up inside of a story or an anecdote or an example than it is for you just to walk away and remember that theory in and of itself. So storytelling is kind of our visual way of communicating information, and it sticks with people quite a bit longer than just information processed and sent through without those sort of visual cues that you're creating in your head. Crucial conversations. These are the types of conversations, and when I was in graduate school, I had to take a whole course on crucial conversations. These are the types of conversations where the stakes are high. Opinions vary, and they may be very strong opinions. We see a lot of crucial conversations, certainly surrounding politics. We see crucial conversations around hiring and firing people. We see crucial conversations around something that is going to impact salary or benefits or things like that. A lot of times we will see this. We see crucial conversations when it comes down to an individual who thinks that they may be rewarded or punished. These are the types of places where we often see crucial conversations in a business setting. Written communication, I won't go into this because we already know that written communication is printed. We also know that it's asynchronous. It's not occurring at the same time. I'm writing it, you're reading it later. Those are the big tenets of written communication. Nonverbal, of course, we've already talked a little bit about this as well. We can see emotions on individuals' faces, that happiness, sadness, anger, and fear, just by their expression. And it is incredibly important in communication to be able to pick up on this, because it may be that you're going along with someone and then suddenly they seem very sad or they seem fearful. And it could be that something you've said has triggered something that they have had in their past. And being open to those those nonverbal cues can be very important to kind of continue to establish that rapport and that trust in that relationship. So always pay attention to an individual when you're speaking, particularly if you're managing an individual or if you're talking about a difficult topic, you're having a crucial conversation, etc. Okay, there are 7 different types of nonverbal communication, and you can kind of see here what those are. One of the things that we see is proxemics. That's a big one that we look at, and proxemics is very culturally specific. In the United States, we kind of say, "Oh, this is my dance space. That's your dance space." We want people to be an arm's length away. In other cultures, the closer they are, that's more acceptable. So really kind of pay attention to that. As someone is coming up in your space real close, it doesn't necessarily mean they're being aggressive. It just may be what's culturally accepted for them. So that is a couple of the things that we do. Tone. I love this example because I think it makes so much sense that the emphasis that you have on a single word can make all the difference. So I'll go through these even though we're on Zoom because I think that they are so interesting. Okay, I did not tell John you were late. Well, that means someone else told you were late, right? I did not tell John you were late. It didn't happen. I did not tell John you were late, but I may have implied it, right? I did not tell John you were late, but I told Sharon and Jose. I did not tell John you were late. I was talking about someone else. I did not tell John you were late. I told him that you are late. I did not tell John you were late. I told him you were attending another meeting, or I told him something else. Tone and the emphasis, and that is what makes written communication so difficult, right? Because you never know when you are sending an email or you are sending a text exactly where the other person on the other end, the receiver, is going to place the emphasis. And if you don't know that, we can see here this very simple sentence means a lot of different things just based on where the emphasis was. So don't ever assume that the person on the other end is understanding what you're saying. Oftentimes in written communication, you need more communication so that an individual understands that context and that tone a little bit better. We try to make it simple and send emojis in this, and emojis can be somewhat, kind of give a little bit of a reference to tone. So we tend to do that as well. All right, body language. Body language is a big one. And one of the things when I teach in person, I always look at the body language of the individuals I'm teaching. It's quite interesting. Just even, by and large, crossing our arms is not bad. A lot of times when I'm walking around in my classrooms, I don't have any, I don't know what to do with my hands. And I'll realize that I'm doing this sort of a number, just kind of walking around and talking and stuff like that. But it is all in the perception, how you give yourself, right? It's all in that facial expression, those nonverbal cues that you're coming up with, as well as what the position is itself. I mean, a lot, if you're laid back and you're not interested, you could be tired, you could be arrogant, you could be, a number of different things. So I think that body language is so critical to pair with the other nonverbal cues to kind of figure out exactly where you are. Eye contact is number one. I have not been anywhere in the world where eye contact did not give a level of trust and sincerity to the communication that I had, even if it was something that was a very benign topic, like, ordering food or something. That trust, that level of respect that eye contact give. And, a lot of people that I see now, especially younger generations, they are not apt to give the same level of eye contact. And I will tell you, it makes all the difference in the world. If you're going to talk to somebody, take a moment, set the phone down, have the eye contact, smile. Smiling makes all the difference in the world. And you will have a much more pleasant conversation. And you know what? And you'll get better service, and people will be nicer to you. Whether that's in a public setting where you're seeking out services, or you're in retail, or if you're on the workplace too. If you need somebody to do something for you at work, and giving them eye contact, leaning in, smiling, saying these sort of simple things can make all the difference in the world. And it's very simple, and it takes no more effort than something else. We're not going to talk too much about this. We talked a little bit about facial expressions. This is fun when I am in teaching this class in person. We do posture. We do this kind of scared, closed posture and this open posture. And we'll kind of go around the room and we'll kind of judge where somebody's at by the type of posture that they've chosen to do. I encourage you to kind of play around with this. And if you've got a friend or a family member, kind of do this game and see if you can't guess exactly what they're thinking or what they're trying to project by the posture alone. Slumping and slouching and laying down, obviously sleepy and tired or bored. Those are all things. Touch is interesting. We've kind of gotten in this point in our own society where, touch is a little bit off limits, right? A handshake is fine, but any other sort of touch is considered taboo. But what we have seen in different countries is that touch does have different meanings. So, for example, in Mexico, when men find themselves being grasped by the arm, so they have that's to pull away is seen rude because they're grasping and shaking hand at the same time. And that is kind of that sign of respect. In Indonesia, to touch anyone on the head or on the foot is considered offensive. Interesting, huh? So, patting kids on the head. Even here in the US, if you were to go and pat an adult on the head, that would be considered disrespectful or offensive. And I've never had anybody ask to touch my feet. So I'm quite certain if they did, I would also still be a little bit taken back. I'm not sure I'd be offended or just a little bit weirded out by the whole thing. All right. The Far East. It's impolite for a woman to shake a man's hand, and that is certainly not surprising in those in some of those Arab cultures as well. And then Americans, we place a value on a firm handshake, but this bone crushing sort of handshake is aggressive, it's arrogant, it's rude in a way, right? Whereas this weird strange thing like this, that's considered it's not a very confident handshake, and people tend to mistrust or distrust an individual who gives you a real weak handshake as well. So have practice that handshake with others. Again, if we were in class, we would be doing that as well. Okay, emotional contagion. What is this? This is my husband does this. My husband has been in sales for all of his career, and I asked him one day, I said, what makes you so good? I said, you're so good at sales. And he said, when the person comes in, I somehow adopt pieces and merits of their personality. And I said, that's really weird. What do you mean? He said, well, if somebody's a little more kind of laid back and country, because I somehow just naturally, subconsciously become a little bit more laid back and country. If they're fast talker or they're this, he goes, I just kind of start matching, that sort of style and that rhythm. And that is this emotional contagion, right? It provides empathy, and it kind of, if you're matching that other individual, this is the process of sharing another person's emotions by mimicking their types of behavior. I encourage you, while it does work in a lot of capacities and it makes people feel at ease, if you do it too much, then it's going to feel as though you are honestly you're making fun of that individual, or you're doing it in jest. So I kind of want to caution you on that front. Here we are with proxemics again, right? This is what we talked about with my dance space, the other dance space. And so it's quite interesting to see that standing too far away will, it kind of is off-putting, like, okay, that's weird. Why are they standing so far? And we're trying to have a conversation. But standing too close can also represent something uncomfortable and too intimate. So one of the things that we say is that if we're at a party and say I'm there with my significant other, that could be an intimate 0 to 18 inches, or maybe it's a close friend. We're talking, that's an intimate circle. That personal circle, they're a professional colleague or somebody that I know I've spent some time with, 1.5 to 5 feet. And then if somebody that I don't really know, we're kind of in these sort of adjacent social circles, it would be more 5 to 7 feet. We would kind of be out a little bit and talking, and and being a little bit more comfortable, allowing other people the opportunity to come in and join that social proxemics. Okay. How do we get our message across? I mean, this is a big one. How do we persuade people? How do we, make sure that people are hearing what we're saying? Well, first we need to empathize with people, right? We want to listen, and we want to empathize with what they're saying. That doesn't mean you're sorry for what they're saying, but it means that you're being a good natural listener, and you're hearing all of the different cues that they're giving you. We're repeating that message. We are timing effectively, right? We're not butting in before we're clear that they have a natural pause. And that's what we tend to do when we have an idea. We want to butt right in. I'm guilty of that. We're all guilty of that. We're also not letting it, them finish, and then we're just kind of staring at them. There's a natural timing progression to all of that. And then we're focusing on the problem, not the person. Oftentimes, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. And I have definitely had friends and family members that it was, well, I mean, this is your problem, you should have done this. Well, this is the problem that I've had, and I'm looking for the solution, not something that is, that is critical of me personally, or otherwise me critical of them personally. Okay. Communication channels. We're not going to go through this because this goes through more of the verbal, written, and nonverbal. You can look through this if you want. Information richness. This is important because it's people tend to think just the opposite. Face-to-face communication has the best and the highest richness in information. I am going to get the most from a face-to-face conversation. That is how we're going to get the best conversation. I'm going to get the most sincerity. I'm going to be able to get a read on people. All of these sort of things happen the most in face-to-face. Video conferencing is also high, and that's part of the reason why you do it in this class. Telephone conversations, just because you can hear tonality, you can hear rhythm, you can hear all those sort of things. Tone is so very, very important, that gets disregarded in written communication. Emails are medium. It depends. It really depends on the sender. It also depends on the receiver, right? So too long can be overwhelming. Too short can be underwhelming and not enough information to be able to draw any sort of understanding from. So handheld devices, medium. Blogs, medium. Formal written documents are low. People just simply don't continue to read them. When's the last time you read an end user license agreement, a EULA, for your phone, or if you're on a website or something like that. Nope, you scrolled down, you clicked agree, and you moved on. They have very low richness of information and very low recall. And of course, spreadsheets. People don't do that. They will look at the charts, they will look at those sort of things. I was once offered a job at a well-known company in Tulsa, just being the go-between between their statisticians and their board and their C-suite, because they wanted somebody who could interpret it and provide analogy and storytelling to the numbers, because they didn't want to look at the spreadsheets, which I found very interesting. I said, well, I appreciate that. I'm not sure that I want that as a job every single day. That feels like a lot. Okay, when do we use written communication and when do we use verbal? Well, we use written information when we have to convey facts, right? This is the information. Here it is all laid out. Verbal, we're emotional about it, right? We want to be able to convey tone and facial expression and all those sort of things. Written, when it needs to become a permanent part. I need to cover myself, the CYA, if you will, and I need somebody to see it. I need to refer back to it at some point. I need to make sure that it has become like a part of this historical sort of filing system that I have. It doesn't need to be permanent necessarily when verbal, but if it's really important, you're going to take the verbal and you're going to turn it into written communication to follow up and say, this is what I thought we talked about. All right. A written communication, it's not as urgent. Verbal is urgent. Now, you can have urgent written communication, but the problem is that it's difficult to control the timing of when a person will respond and when a person will see it. They tried to control a little bit of that on the iPhone with the read receipt and things like that. A lot of people turn those off because they just don't want people knowing if they want the time to kind of think about it and digest something. Written communication when you don't need immediate feedback. Verbal when you do, although it is okay to say, give me some time to get back to you on this. I need 5 minutes. I need 10 minutes, whatever that is. That is still immediate feedback. You just need to take a few minutes to formulate your thoughts. I had a graphic designer work for me a few years ago, and he would come in with his work and he would lay it down and he would say, what do you think? And I said, okay, give me just a bit and I'll get back with you. One day he came in and he said, why do you do that? I said, well, here's the thing. I said, if you come in here and you lay this down and my immediate response is, oh, I don't like it. I said, you're going to immediately start thinking, reworking it. I said, but it could be that 10 minutes, an hour, a day later, I think, oh, that was my personal reaction. And this is good for the company. And I don't want him to change anything or just a few things. I said, or you could come in here and I say, oh my God, I love it. It's amazing. And I said, and then after an hour or whatever, I go, you know what? I personally love this, but I'm not the customer, and we need to make quite a lot of adjustments in order for it to work for the organization. I said, either one of these isn't good for you, because you either get, good behavior or good feedback that you feel like is sincere and find out later is not, or you get criticism that you found out that I want to backpedal from later on. I said, either one of those is not a good situation. So I try to give myself a moment to digest it and put myself in the frame of the consumer here at the organization and the organization's needs. And that lets me think from that lens and not from my own personal lens. So it is okay if someone comes to you and wants immediate feedback to take a minute. It is actually better to do that than to give them feedback that you have to change later on because you were a bit too hasty in what you told them. Okay, use written communication when the ideas are complicated, right? We need a bunch of things written out. I realized just today, as a matter of fact, I was trying to explain a very complicated idea, which I felt like was good, but I did a poor job of explaining it. If I had written it out in the way that I have on my notes, I think it could have been conceived. The problem that I might have now is that they've heard the idea and they've already, in some respects, dismissed it. So now I have to really try to figure out a way to get this in front of them in a more organized fashion and get them to really seriously consider it again, because now their bias has already been formed. When do we use verbal? When it's simple ideas. It's just a quick, simple idea. I don't need that sort of feedback. I don't need to give people time to also digest it and come up with their own ideas on how to support or refute it. Okay, the use of business email. It's wonderful, right? We love emails, but over 100 million adults in the United States use email more than once a day. Even small children use email in school. They all are assigned an email all the way up. Email's wonderful communication, but it gets so cluttered. I don't know about your inbox, but I'm constantly thinking, what is all this junk? and where is it coming from, and weeding through all that can be difficult. So the use of business email for business is fantastic, but just understand that there are limitations to using that as well. Okay, let's jump down a little bit. What are some of the problems that we see with email or using digital written type of communication? Well, it can communicate emotions poorly, right? We've talked about that already. It's very different to determine someone's tone or write something with tone, unless you're just overly using superlatives or you're overly negative. It reduces politeness. We tend to, we always call these people keyboard cowboys, right? People who wouldn't dare say something in public are happy to respond on social media with these negative, horrible comments. And we just seems like respect and politeness goes out the window because people feel very comfortable hiding behind their keyboard or their computers. It's insufficient. It can be ambiguous and confusing. I don't really know what's going on. I've jumped in the middle of a conversation. You ever been copied on something where it has clearly gone on for quite a while, and then you're trying to go back through all of the threads? You realize you maybe are missing something, and not everything is on this thread. You're trying to figure out what is going on here. It would have been better if that person picked up the phone and said, "Hey, I'm going to send you a thread of emails, but this is what's going on." You'd have had a lot more context, and you would have been able to see what's happening and kind of where your position and why you've been copied on it. It creates information overload. Sometimes there's just so much there, we cannot reasonably process it all. And so that is something, that is why so many messages from businesses get deleted without opening, because we've got so much information, we've got so much going on. We prioritize and then the rest gets thrown out. Perhaps there's a day when we don't have as much coming in and we're able to kind of look at those. But that comes back to that, selective perception as well. Okay, communicating through social media. Social media is wonderful. It is, for businesses, the number one way that they use word of mouth marketing. It's why they have a social channel. It allows people to connect. It is, it was wonderful during COVID when people were isolated from one another and they wanted the ability to maintain those social connections, because we're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be, having conversations and be with people and see people and all of those sort of things. So social media has been wonderful from that standpoint. I can't imagine what things would have been like if we had had a pandemic during a time where we did not have social media. That would have been very isolating in our very connected world, for sure. So it tends to be more conversational. It's a very sort of interesting thing. All right, so how do we respond to others? Well, there's 4 types of responses. We're going to get into them here, but they are advising, deflecting, probing, and reflecting. What's advising? This is providing this direction. It's kind of like you think of an advisor, right? Direction, evaluation. It creates a lot of control, but it can produce a lot of dependence on someone. If you are so accustomed to coming to someone for advice, a lot of people can become dependent on that person. So just kind of think that advising and what that looks like, that mentor type of relationship can become very dependent or codependent in some ways. Okay, deflecting. What is deflecting? Well, we've all been in these conversations, right? You're telling a friend, "Oh, you won't believe I had this, and I just had the worst day, and I know my day has been," and then suddenly it shifts to something that is either something totally different. I don't want to talk about this, or it's something that I'm bringing up to kind of take over this conversation. It's very interesting, and it implies that the person who began the conversation is not important, that they're not respected, and that their problems or what they're bringing to the table in this conversation is not nearly important as the person, the receiver in this conversation. It can be very difficult to have those conversations, as we all know. Probing. What is probing? This is used to gather information. Parents tend to do this with kids. So what'd you do at school today? Who'd you talk to? Who'd you eat lunch with? Who'd you sit with? Oh, really? What'd you guys talk about? Oh, okay. Well, what are her parents like? So we have to be cautious about how we go into probing, because we're naturally curious creatures, right? And if we're very interested, sometimes our interest can turn into this very strange sort of probing, invasive sort of conversation. We have to balance the, the listening and the questions. If I'm questioning, oh, da, 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 oh, da, and let some of that flow more naturally. But you will see, sometimes this is how these conversations take place. It's just question after question after question. What about questioning techniques? Well, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't ask the right question, you'll get the right answer. So we have to think about what kinds of questions we're asking people. If we're asking, dumb questions, we're going to get dumb answers, right? I've had some job interviews that I have decided not to work at the company, even if they offered it, just because I thought they asked some really unimportant questions that I thought were irrelevant to whether or not I would be a good fit at the organization and provide value based on my skill set. Questions like, about cartoon characters or something like that. I just thought that they were, particularly for an executive level type of position, I thought some of them were, and it's one thing to have one or two kind of corny questions, so long as they have context. And then after the fact that you're describing why you would have asked that person. If you're going to ask me whether I like Fred or Barney, I'd like to kind of know why when I give you the answer. And I think that that's important. If you're going to have an interesting question, make sure you provide context after the fact. These probing questions, we talked about that, but this idea of an investigation, it can be a little bit invasive, so careful. These leading questions, all right? People tend to make assumptive questions all the time. So, so you guys are probably going to get married, right? Well, that can be very uncomfortable if that's not the case, right? So you think you're probably going to get that promotion, don't you? Oh, it's if you answer no, I don't, then you're either lacking in confidence or don't think you have the skills, or removing yourself from the conversation where that's concerned. If you say yes, you come off as arrogant. You maybe know something. That's how rumors get spread. It is a difficult thing when you are the receiver of a leading question. So how might you answer that if somebody says, so you think you're probably going to get that promotion, right? uh, you know if I was considered for that promotion, I would certainly be happy. I do know that there are a number of qualified candidates here at the organization, but if given the opportunity, I certainly would put my hat in, because I think I've done a lot of the work to prove that I could be a continued asset at that level. It's just, you're taking that leading out of it. So sometimes you have to do that with your coworkers in order to prevent that spread of gossip and grapevine. Open and close-ended questions, right? Open questions have, we give the opportunity for someone to expand. These are great party starters. You want to talk about, you don't want to say, do you like to travel? Yes or no. At a cocktail party, where you might be meeting other business associates, you want to say, where's the coolest place you've traveled? Where all would you love to go? Tell me about it. These are open-ended. It's giving an opportunity for a conversation to get started. Okay. Let's think about how we would open this. Okay. So as I said, what did you do on vacation? Finding out more detail. Oh my gosh. So you ended up and you went snorkeling. Have you snorkeled before? Where else? Oh my gosh, this was your first time. Tell me about, that experience, why you chose to snorkel. What all did you see? You're giving an opportunity to expand that conversation and form a relationship. Forming even like forming a team, there's that similar sort of pathway that we see when we meet an individual for the first time. Okay, closed questions. So if I get this qualification, will I get a raise? It's a yes or a no. It's not leaving a lot of opportunity for a gray area. It's one or the other. It's a pass fail. It's yes, no. So it's X, Y. It's whatever. It's yes or no. So it doesn't leave gray area. Now, in some circumstances, these closed questions can be great. In others, people don't like being boxed in, and closed questions can often make people feel boxed in. And they also shut down the conversation and the negotiation and all of those things very quickly, and can be difficult to recover and continue that conversation and establish that rapport. Okay, funnel questions. Funnel questions are the best. Funnel questions work best with kids. Okay. And this is a conversation that I have here that shows you what this funnel. So I'll kind of read it out to you because I think it is a good example here. So how many people were involved with the fight? About 10. Were they kids or adults? Mostly kids. What sort of ages were they? 14 or 15. Wow. Were any of them wearing anything like distinctive? Yeah, some of them had some red baseball caps on. Okay, do you remember if there was like a logo or anything on them? And we see police questioning do this, right? They funnel down, they get those details. They start with the high level of recall and they kind of come down into those recall. But that works very well for a lot of things. If you're trying to get someone to recall something that happened, funnel questions are the best way to do that. Okay, rhetorical questions. We all know about rhetorical questions. They're not really questions at all. They're just statements that have been phrased in a question format. Oh, isn't that nice? That's not really a question, and you're not really looking for a response. And it can be awkward if the other person didn't pick that up and they start trying to respond. Oh, yeah, it really is nice, because obviously in that sense it may have been just a little bit sarcastic. So that's what a rhetorical question is, and being able to read that it makes some sense in that case as well, not answering. Okay, folks, that has been our part 2 for communication. I will see you in the next week, and again, thanks for joining me today.